A couple of weeks ago, I made a video detailing my problems with the first half of Season 3 of Rick and Morty. I said that the writing for episodes 2, 3, and 4 felt kinda off, and that in those episodes, along with episode 5, Beth was awful, Morty was a little too evil, and Rick seemed to have lost all agency and competence, which led to a dynamic that I felt didn't really work for the show. Well, it was as if the writing team watched my video, froze time, then retooled the rest of the season to specifically address my problems, because the second half of the season is exactly what I wanted from Season 3. The stories are darker, but they still have a great sense of Rick and Morty humor to balance things out. The writing doesn't flat out tell you what the characters are thinking, they make you think about these characters and their personalities through subtext. Two of the best moments in the season were the scenes where detoxed Morty doesn't hang up the phone and allows himself to get captured and retoxified, and Beth making her decision to become cloned or not, which is still left ambiguous in the final episode. These moments speak volumes about the characters without really speaking that much. And yeah, credit where credit is due, the Rick Lantis mix-up is a friggin' masterpiece. Easily one of the top 5 best episodes of the series thus far. Considering how I rewrote the entire ending of my Shark Tale YTP in order to accommodate this episode's ending, you know it must have left quite an impact. Most of all, I was incredibly pleased to find that the personality and role of every single main character in the second half of the season was a complete 180 from how they were in the first half. Except Summer. She was completely pointless throughout the entire season, but whatever. Let's recap how these characters changed. First, there's Jerry, who I said I was starting to actually like and feel sympathy for. That flew out the window with ABC's of Beth, which may have been Jerry at his absolute worst. Let me put it this way, I absolutely love Ronaldo. Yeah, the single most hated character in Steven Universe is one of my favorite Beach City characters. I think he's hilarious and I enjoyed every episode that focused on him. Until Rocknaldo, and yeah, he was a piece of shit in this episode. This was the one that finally made me concur with the rest of the fanbase and absolutely hate him. ABC's of Beth was Jerry's Rocknaldo. God, I wanted to punch this sniveling dick in the face. But then he had that nice moment in the finale, and yeah, honestly, I have very mixed opinions on him. But we'll talk more about him later. Mr. Poopy Butthole, who I previously complained wasn't in the season nearly enough despite being part of the main cast, had a very satisfying explanation why in the finale. Plus his influence is still present everywhere in the household, so yeah, I'm satisfied with his use this season. And if ABC's of Beth was a cancer sore for Jerry's characterization, it was a goldmine for Beth's. This is the kind of episode I wanted for Beth for so long, and it gave us a satisfying characterization as a child sociopath, as well as an amazing dynamic with Rick. And that clone business is so intriguing. In fact, she's arguably the most interesting character on the show now, in the span of only 2 episodes. Morty is also way less vengeful than he was in the first half of the season, but still a lot smarter than he was in previous seasons. This is a dynamic that really works for him, like when he knew exactly what alien race Kiara was, or his role as Rick's equal in the finale. And then there's Rick, who I said was constantly neutered in each episode of the season since Rick Shank Redemption. And again, the second half of the season did this right. In Morty's Mind Blowers and ABC's of Beth, he was very much on top of things via Summer's Mind Blower backup system, and his continued attitude and competence after getting his arm ripped off. He felt on top of things, and in Rest and Ricklaxation, he had a very valid reason not to be as competent. He literally wasn't himself. So yeah, this season really turned itself around. Even though I wasn't a big fan of Morty's Mind Blowers, I thought this was a great second half that made up for a weak first half, leading to an uneven but still pretty good season. Then I saw the finale. Oh. I'm gonna be honest, taking this episode on its own as an individual episode, it was amazing. Honestly, I think it's my 3rd favorite of the entire season. Here's a ranking, by the way. But yeah, this episode was a brilliant concept. Rick and Morty fucking with the US president by doing his job was consistently funny, and this was by far the zaniest episode all season. There were so many memorable moments and lines, and it really makes me wish Dan Harmon would write more episodes. This one was so tightly written and clever. I loved everything about this episode. Until the last 5 minutes. That's where it all falls apart, and it makes you question the point of not only this episode, but the entire season. Because this is a great episode with a rushed resolution to the entire season's main plotline scotch taped onto the ending of a completely unrelated episode. This was not originally intended to be the season finale, and it shows. To be fair, I kinda like the unintentional contrast here. This episode goes to great lengths to show that Rick is virtually unstoppable and can literally best the leader of the free world at anything, and yet he's completely powerless to stop Jerry from winning his family over. I think that's a really clever idea, and it's not a terrible way to wrap up a season that started with Rick seemingly in control of everything, only to lose control over his family in the finale. The problem? Number 1, there's no build-up, and number 2, the payoff is rushed. This episode had nothing to do with Jerry until Beth dropped in on him and decided she loved him again. That's all well and good, but the catalyst for this episode's climax revolves around the dynamic between Rick and Jerry, two characters who hadn't interacted since episode 5. Rick telling Jerry that he won and giving up his control over the family doesn't work because that's not what this episode was about. It was about Rick and Morty trolling the president, but then that plotline grinds to a screeching halt to resolve a conflict that hasn't been addressed since 5 episodes ago. It makes you wonder what the point of the entire president plotline was. It had none. There's no resolution, no lasting stakes. It's not like Rick becomes an enemy of the state or anything. They hit the reset button on the episode's main conflict, which is a terrible idea for a season finale. The Jerry resolution comes out of nowhere and concludes super quickly. Then all of a sudden we're back to the status quo in the most rushed way possible. And again, this ending could have worked if the episode was actually about the Rick, Jerry, Beth dynamic, but it wasn't. It was 2 different episodes scotch taped together, and it drops the ball on a lot of the season's characterization. Rick's growing incompetence and Morty's more sinister tendencies didn't really go anywhere. Jerry's role this season flip-flopped so much from sniveling coward to total asshole that it's hard to pinpoint what exactly his overall purpose was. Beth is the only character with any interesting development, but it's not enough to save a season that was, quite frankly, stuck so far up its own ass in terms of character development without even keeping its characterization consistent. I didn't need Phoenix Person and Tammy to come back yet, and I didn't need evil Morty in the finale. All I wanted was some consistent characterization for the main cast and some sort of payoff for Rick and Morty's changing dynamics. And hell, I didn't even want that from the start. All I wanted was more classic Rick and Morty adventures. Episode 10 finally gave me that, only to cut it short and jump to a rushed, unsatisfying resolution to a completely different plotline. So yeah, season 3 wasn't bad, but considering how its goals seemed to be to flesh out the main characters more, it was kind of a failure. This season didn't just have a main character problem though, it had a side character problem too. The best characters of Rick and Morty are the side characters, and the first 2 seasons delivered memorable characters in spades. Mr. Meeseek, Scary Terry, Aberdolf Linkler, the Cromulons, Crabopulous Michael, friggin' Bird Person. Think about all these characters and ask yourself, how many characters did season 3 give us that fit the same mold? How many characters will be remembered for some of Rick and Morty's most memorable moments? I would say 1. Noob Noob. And even then, he's just a reskin of Mr. Poopy Butthole. This season dropped the ball on the best elements of Rick and Morty. The funny side characters, the spacefaring and dimension-hopping adventures, the fun dynamic between a mad scientist and his bumbling grandson. I'm just gonna say it, taken as a whole, this season was not worth the wait. The Rick Shank redemption and the Rick Lantis mix-up were for sure, as well as elements of other episodes, but the fact that such an off season took so long to produce is really kind of disappointing. I have 2 more points I want to bring up before I wrap up. First of all, yes, the season's weakest episodes are still 2, 3, and 4. Yes, the episodes that came from female writers are the weakest ones. But again, I don't understand how people think their gender is a factor. It's because they're new. I still see people saying that female writers ruined Rick and Morty and that women can't write adult cartoons. And that's objectively wrong. BoJack Horseman, which is a much better show than Rick and Morty by the way, has a pretty equal balance of male and female writers, and it's hard to tell the difference between episodes written by one gender or the other. I especially have to bring up season 4 episode 2 and season 4 episode 11, which may just be the 2 best episodes of any TV show, let alone adult animated show I've ever seen. Both better than these 2 episodes, and both written by a woman. Now, to be fair, while BoJack and Rick and Morty are both raunchy, absurdist, adult animated shows, they're very different. BoJack is more about character development and heavy drama, while Rick and Morty is more about existential philosophy and violent sci-fi adventures. If you had to pick one that women would be better suited to write for, it would probably be BoJack, though there's no reason a woman can't do well writing for a show like Rick and Morty. And these writers have potential, I just think they should have started out co-writing with a veteran writer. That way, the writing could have been kept more subtle and more in line with the rest of the series. But it sucks that there are actual people who are stupid enough to blame female writers for the finale. You know, the episode that Dan Harmon himself wrote. Which brings me to my last point. I'm done with Rick and Morty. Kinda. Season 3 wasn't bad enough to kill my interest in the show. I mean, it wasn't even bad. But you know what is horrendous? The Rick and Morty fanbase. I've come to despise both the pseudo-intellectual bullshit spouting fans and the normie trash fans who shout "Pickle Rick" at the top of their lungs. This show was great when it was a cult hit that not many people watched, but just like anything good, it got too mainstream for its own good and now I'm sick of it. Hamilton is my favorite work of fiction in any medium, but I can't even listen to it anymore without groaning. I'm so sick of it because it got taken over by normies.
Angelica! Eliza.
Steven Universe is my favorite TV show, but I didn't even watch it until about a year ago, because the fanbase is so cancerous and so widespread that I avoided it for 3 years. Undertale is similar with one exception. I haven't even played it yet. I didn't bother because I was so tired of seeing it everywhere that it was pretty much ruined for me before I even got into it. I believe people who tell me it's amazing, I just can't tolerate it because of its fanbase. Geez, I better play Cuphead before the same thing happens. This is the level Rick and Morty is at, though I think it's even worse because at this point the show seems to be catering to normies, and it's all thanks to Pickle Rick. By all accounts, it's a decent episode, but to me, it represents the normification of Rick and Morty. The show's dumbest material is the most popular, and that to me is the biggest problem with Rick and Morty. So I'm done. I'm done with videos analyzing Rick and Morty, because God knows we have enough of those. In addition, I have no plans to make another Rick and Morty YTP. I'll still use the show for reference jokes and other YTPs, but honestly, I'm so burned out from this show that I need to get away from it as much as I can. It would be so easy to make some bullshit like YTP, Dave and the Giant Pickle Rick, and get a shit ton of views, but honestly, I don't want to feed the flame anymore. I need to get away from this show like I did with Hamilton and Steven Universe, and remember why I fell in love with it in the first place. So, thanks for watching, and as they say in bird tongue, wubba-lubba-dub-dub.